Whoops. Sorry about that. Right. I think we're live now. Sorry.
Oh no! I'm
My
not rubbing. I'm just
my
joking.
computer froze. My mouse froze. I couldn't move it. G'day, everybody. I'm having technical difficulties with my mouse. Sorry about that. I'm David Applegate, author of the book ProWritingAid, book 1 of the Empire of Elves, and welcome to Future Fantasy Empire. Today with me is A.G. Flitcher, author of the Boone and Jacque series. Well, Andre, introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, everyone. My name is H.U. Fletcher. I am a 6-time award-winning author, and my series Boone and Jacque has placed second place for Fantasy Series of the Year, orchestrated by Chanticleer. And Book 4, which came out in August, is now in the quarterfinals for 4 divisions in the Chanticleer Book Awards, which is for Clue, Mystery and Mayhem, Global Thriller, and Fantasy. And I am very proud of that accomplishment. I hope that I keep going, and I know I will. And I love to write fantasy and thriller, but I do dabble in other genres.
When did you realize you wanted to be an author or writer?
I've been asked that like a million times, not just in interviews, but by people in general. And it's kind of a mixed bag because at first when I was writing, like before Boone and Jacque, I was under my legal name, and I wrote this duology called Unforgiven, which was my creative outlet to work through the loss of my mother. But to me, what actually re-engaged me and reignited the flame for my absolute passion for writing was actually me trying to understand the foundation of the craft of writing, and rather than making it sound like I know what I'm talking about without being educated. So the way that started is I was trying to collaborate with a friend of mine who was an illustrator, more for like t-shirts, so not really, lavish, just kind of print design. Um, but she was more about the money and the marketing before the artwork was even started. So I was like, isn't that kind of backwards to start with? I want this to be a top 10 on Amazon, but then not do the work first. So because I felt like I can't really, correct her on her approach, I decided to just apply for school to transform my associates in creative writing into a bachelor's. And then because I was obligated with my writing classes to obviously read books, whether it's technological or uh, for leisure, that's what really gave me back my love of reading that I lost for quite some time. So once I started reading again and saw the effect that reading books always had on me, and even more so that I started up again, that's what really made me want to not just write for the sake of a hobby, but to really see the power I can create, the change that I can create in others. Because to me, storytelling is not just about making up some kind of fantasy to give a moment in time for others to escape from the reality. It's also to invoke some kind of I don't know, a change in life or some kind of realization of who you are. But it's also, to understand myself as a human being, because that's really all we're trying to do is understand ourselves and how humanity and society works.
Yeah, I think the best books aren't the most entertaining, but the most thought provoking.
Yeah, of
I
course. I
think.
mean, if a book doesn't make you think, is literally just noise and color.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. It's like blockbuster movies. People go see them, but a week later they can't tell the difference between one and the other, and
that's
that
so.
has
I'm
happened.
laughing because it's true.
Yeah, yeah, it's right. It's funny because it's true. That's the meme, right? It's funny because it's
Yeah.
true. I like that meme.
Mhm.
And obviously, as you wanted to be a writer through that process, you came about coming and going, and in your returning, you created a book series.
Yes,
Now,
Boone
tell
and
us
Jacque.
a bit about Boone and Jacque.
Mhm. So, Boone and Jacque, here's the first book. All right. Ooh, now it's in frame, which
I can
got
smell
the
fresh
Literary
paper.
Titan Gold Book Award. Okay. This is Jacque. Oops. Boone. Okay. And this is a sneak peek of where they go in book 2. Okay. The thing that really started this was actually me changing my approach to writing. Before, I was extremely paranoid about not knowing what I was doing because before I was educated on novel writing, I was a screenwriter. So it was very formulaic, very like this happens. No, no need for explaining inner monologue or anything. You know,
It's
I
well
just
conducted. Yeah.
yeah. So when it came to writing this novel, I was actually really nervous because um I never wrote like in my head. I was like, I don't want to write block text. I don't want to just have have to rely on ink and paper. But once I saw like you could actually hold something that you created, that's what really made me keep going. So once book 1 was done, I was like, you know what? That was actually a lot of fun. I didn't worry about when the book was going to be finished. I didn't worry about what people thought. I worried a little bit about the original cover because it looked very strange and didn't fit the tone at all, which is why I had it redone. But once I saw the story developing and really embracing the characters' arc and taking them in different directions, and there's no rhyme or reason for a direct path, which is what I wanted. I don't want to give my characters a linear path because life doesn't work that way. Life is not linear. If you think that life is linear, then you're limiting your options to where you want life to take you.
Or you're in a rowboat and you're just following the stream.
Yeah,
You're not.
they're not robots.
You're not in. If you're autopiloting in life, it's linear. If you're making decisions, at least at the very basic core, it's binary, yes or no.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, when when uh when the characters start in this book, they are pretty binary. They are who they think they are, but they're not because they're kids. Kids don't know who they are yet. They're brand new to the world. So
that's why their
yeah,
emotional development is last. Their first is their intellectual development, so they can process. And
yeah, and
that
what's
was actually something I did for research to find out,
yeah,
so I could portray a child. Um, and because we're getting into the area preparation for a new book. I mean, you did a lot of preparation, obviously.
yeah, for book 1, I interviewed someone who was a foster child or was in the past because Jacques is around now. That guy. He is a foster child that was brought into a rich British family and had no memory of his birth parents. And in book 5, that memory, as brutal as it is, was necessary for him to be aware of. But because he was only a child when he was fostered, it was best that I not even think about what happened to the birth parents until the very end, so that I focus on his development as a human being, and then uh, bring it home full circle to where he came from.
That's pretty good stuff. I mean, a lot of people use life paths merely as a hi. This is a character trait. I'm never going to visit this character trait again. uh, not pointing at anything in particular cyberpunk, but there are certain genres cyberpunk where life paths are so common, but they're never visited. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's just confined to cyberpunk or it's just a product of the assumptions that Gibson and others made and continue to make, where they assume you know what life path is and what those life path means, and the lack of world building is terrible. But do you have any actual inspirations that went into this series?
In terms of world building, I drew a lot from actually where I live, which is a small town here in British Columbia, Canada, and a lot of it is from I guess, the old shell of the town that I live in. Because in the past, I wouldn't say it was very ghetto. It was more earthbound. There was less modernization of buildings, or even how the community was engaged in the city, and it had always had this primitive urban feel to it. So I wanted to kind of mirror that feeling. So when you read book one, it really expresses, how can I put this, a neglect for proper constructive uh, development, not just in the characters but in the world that they're in. So when you see how these kids are playing outside, is very rustic. So Boone and Jacque were always, eating candy and playing board games and whatnot in the basement that was very barren. And when we go to see how the adults are, there are some that have wealth, but it still feels uh, in unison and consistent uh, growing of classes. It's not like there's someone who's a bum and then someone who's like some castle rich person. It's just they all have their own level of wealth that fits the tone of the town.
I think some would call it stilted, rather, stiff. Everything's just slightly unnatural. I understand rustic communities. So I've lived on a farm outside of the big city, and the
Mm.
difference between the two suburbs, eventually, you didn't have malls, you didn't have theaters, you didn't have many places to go or many things to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is a rather stilted society, that they make no progress, even though they can see a better life just down the road.
Mhm.
They continue to be stuck where they are because it's comfortable.
Yeah, and what I did to prevent that from being monotonous to the reader is when things begin to unfold in terms of the magical realism being incorporated into the town. It's more of an unearthing of a stale environment, where the stale environment is essentially a facade that was built on top of an original land that belonged once to magical kings. And when those characters, uh they don't really resurface fully, the lackeys and creatures resurface, who are an extension of these kings, but the kings are now reawakened and want their land back. So this is not really too big of a spoiler, but they're ripped out of town, the main characters, and are brought into a parallel wasteland that the Dark King, King Reeve, has control over, and eventually meets these characters. So I always liked having a urban feeling where, I know it's a cliche where, oh, nothing happens in this town, but then it does. I was trying to make that more unique, where it's not like everything changes and then it stays that way. It's more like something happened and then the normality of life kind of settles in, but there's a shift in how people behave and how they see themselves, whether they're in a position of power or not.
Yeah, that's important to try and cover a few stratas of society. I know, though, a lot of fantasy, they these days, with the hero's journey redefining fantasy, everybody, so many are the orphan boy saves the world, and
Yeah.
it's just so Harry Potter Skywalker boring,
Yeah. And see,
that
what I
oh,
did
sorry, go ahead.
that was important to me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't want the story to feel like I'm going to have some big triumphant relief at the end of the series. And
Yeah.
it's not that I'm going to take everything away from them, but I'm not going to give them this, predictable heroic arc at the end. It's just they're going to transform with all of this stuff happening, and by the end of it, they're just going to have to learn how to use the tools that they've been given to tackle on life once the story's over.
I was just going to add that it's become so boring and predictable that you could get so many stories now and put them side by side and just go, Star Wars is chapter 1, Harry Potter is chapter 2, the Marvel series, and just go back 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and and then at the end you go, yep, Thanos was right. Thanos for Emperor.
Yeah.
And
a lot of the reviewers that and people that I've gotten awards from, they've said that my story, not only is it unpredictable in a good way, but it makes them want more. It makes them want to know what's going to happen next, because there is no knowing of what's going to happen next. It's not that I end each book on a cliffhanger. It's more like I treat each book as its own genre in terms of tone, without really forgetting or disconnecting from the previous book.
there aren't many series that have done that. Most tend to be more of the same, particularly cyberpunk or apocalypse movies, where the apocalypse just keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
Rage type, first person shooter rage type stories where it's just a war or a rampage, that it's just always progressively worse, or you get the optimistic stories, that there's always there's the heroine who's always optimistic and the hero is always trying to protect her. And I think one of the stories that stands out as probably an inspiration, I would say, to the twist was the ending of Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh, yeah, I saw that movie.
You're not gonna kiss her? He turns around and says, "No," and walks away. I think that was the birth of the movie twist.
Yeah.
But
I remember that movie. That was amazing.
That was amazing. Yeah, amazing story, very inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, I never thought I'd see Jack Nicholson in such such a movie. I was just like, wow, he really, like, as a young actor, he was just like, I'm gonna try something new.
Yeah, he's a very versatile actor. Still is, just more and more defined as the tough bad guy.
Yeah, and I'm glad that he retired, because he said that he was starting to forget his lines, and that the only way he'd ever come back to acting is for a role that's worth doing.
Yeah, he did say he wanted to revisit the Cuckoo's Nest, and that was probably one of the few things he would have revisited. the coming out. But then the Joker movies, I think the Joker movie ended that project.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
I think some choices he made him go, you know what? I can't keep doing this.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite writer or a particular book of inspiration?
Well, I know we talked about this before, but I am a fan of Stephen King in terms of the way he educates people. And there are books that I like of his, and he is the one that I look up to the most. However, I am taking a page out of his book in terms of not focusing so much on reading every single book he's ever written and just diversifying my reading, especially in fantasy. So right now I'm kind of multitasking with my reading, where I'm reading again Harry Potter just to refresh my memory. And also I started reading the Shannara series by Terry Brooks.
Now, to clarify with Harry Potter, there are two types of Harry Potter readers that I've come across.
Mm-hmm.
They've read the Harry Potter book and seen all the movies, or they've read and seen all the books and movies. You know, there seems to be nobody who's read the books and haven't seen the movies, or they've only read one book and that was it. You know, they've either seen, you know, but it's one of those because it's just such a familiar story, I think. I mean, in terms of it's got so many, it's like every schoolboy fantasy novel, you know, that I've ever read.
Yeah, I mean, I'm rereading it just because a lot of people say that I have a similar style to J.K. Rowling, which I find a bit odd because it's not like it's the only books I've ever read.
But her style isn't hers. Her style is plain English.
Yeah, that's why I was like,
it's a textbook style. It's literally
create English language.
Yeah, it's literally a textbook of the English language. That's her style. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I have a preference to more the UK based in terms of like how, because to me UK books have a different approach to how they introduce characters and world, where it's very I guess it's very unison, and or you know,
very plain. How do you do? This is my cousin. Yes, it's
and
very
that's why I started
English.
reading other books so I don't have to come off that way.
Yes, it's very English. Whereas the French, see that guy over there? And then they'll give us, you know, a long winding story about how he beat him up in school and such. And then you'll finally learn his name.
Yeah, and see, that's why with every book that I was writing for this series, I started to read other books. So, for example, in book 2, which is more of a Western fantasy, the smallest book of the series, which is I think 296 pages. That was actually inspired from when I read the first book of the Dark Tower series. So
I admit I've only read the first book, and I think it's called Weird West now. I forgot. I think it was called a dark Western fantasy. I think it's, and Weird West is just one of those things where I was into it for a little while. I would say the Dark Tower is probably the height of the genre, but it's something that I think, like, you know, science fantasy, like, is all so niche at the moment. I think when Dark Tower came out, I think a lot of people read it. I think that's why the movie failed, is because it's worn off. You know, the novelty has worn off, which is a shame because it's probably one of the better books he's ever written.
Yeah, and he was on cocaine when he wrote that.
As if you couldn't tell by the action scenes every few seconds.
I read somewhere that he actually had Kleenex in his nose when he was writing the whole series because he was that coked up in the whole series that he was writing.
Don't leak out. Don't leak out.
But yeah, every book that I write with this series, it's kind of like me being bored with myself. So in book 3, okay, that's basically an undead werewolf, which it's not really clear, but you can kind of see the fangs in there. That was my more, how can I put this? It had stronger fantasy elements in there. So this emerald spirit inside his chest, that was based on my attempt to understand where is this all coming from, because in book 3 they go back into town after being separated from that town, and the magic and the dark magic followed them back there. So they thought they got rid of it with whatever battle that they went through in book 2, and the I can't say that, you have to read the book. Basically, this creature that comes back to town is some weird sort of amalgamation of dark magic and a half dead spirit. So I don't know where I came up with that, where I drew inspiration from. People keep asking me, where do you come up with these ideas? I'm like, here.
I'm
So
playing a role game. I am the dungeon master. I
yeah.
am the NPC and the player character in my own adventure, and I'm writing it down as I go along. What part of that don't you understand?
Yeah.
All of it.
And then I decided to try and be a bit more grounded with book 4. So this is more of a murder mystery, hence the teacup and the mushrooms on it, which is a hint to hallucinogenics being involved in this story. That was my attempt to really change course for the story, where I fast forward into the future where they're 30 years old instead of 15, and I focus more on how do they develop as adults now that this magical chaos is behind them, and is that it? But of course, chaos always follows them. However, instead of relying heavily on magical realism, I focused more on the characters in the town, which is a new one, Citrus, which is why book 4 is called Citrus Moonlight, because there's something in the town that's actually more at the core of how the series is going to conclude. So this town is actually on top of the Earth's core that has a connection to the sister planet Theranosita. So in book 5 that I'm working on now, I'm about 41,000 words in, so I still have ways to go. I decided to give Boone and Jacque a more clear understanding of their purpose for all this chaos. So why are they always at the center of chaos, whether magic is involved entirely or partially? And in part 3 of the final book is where they're going to have more definitive answers.
Yeah. And now 41,000 words. Depending on your Stephen King era, that's either 4 chapters or 10 chapters.
Yep, that's right.
I think his eras are defined by the quantity and affordability of cocaine.
I will follow suit.
Allegedly, yeah.
Hmm.
Because he has denied a few times.
Yeah.
But then again, he wrote it down and put it in his book. So people just go, Steve, page 49, Steve.
Hint, hint.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a new writer?
If you're a new writer, just write. There is no need for you to publish anything just yet. Just write for yourself, maybe even do it in blog form and just have your close friends read it. That way you see what other people think of your work and you don't lose any money or shame, because when you're first writing, you have no idea what you're doing. Even if you're well educated and you feel that you're the Shakespeare of poetry or whatever, if that's who you look up to as a poet. Um, because when you're first writing, it's your first attempt to come up with something constructive. It's not that you don't know how to write a story, it's that you don't know what attracts readers. Because there's a difference between being technically inclined when it comes to the craft of storytelling and being practiced as a writer. Because when you become a practiced writer, you begin to understand what makes sense, what makes a story easy to read, because you can have a simple book and no one will be able to read it. It's not because it's hard to understand, it's because it's like, do I really want to read this? And same thing goes for complex. A complex book can be a fast read if it's engaging. If it's not engaging, it's like, this is just a complicated math problem that I don't want to understand. So,
Yeah.
that's really the advice that I can give you. That's the best nugget of of advice, because so many new authors that I know are too afraid to do anything, because they're like, what if nobody reads it? What if I don't make any money? It's like, who cares? You just started.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, but if you want to get into writing to make money, be a journalist.
Yeah, write dry facts.
But here's advice that that some people don't understand, and you sort of touched on it.
Mhm.
Mom, Dad, I've written a book. Before I let you read it, we've got to be cool about a few things.
Don't freak out.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I don't really talk about my writing with my dad, because he doesn't really understand it and he doesn't even read himself. But the real there's another reason too. My characters, not all of them, but some of them are from the LGBTQ community, because I got tired of reading hetero normative concentric ideals and relationships. So for example, Boone, reorganize myself here. Boone is straight, but I wrote him not as the typical kid, as in he starts out typical, but as he becomes an adult, he
Mm.
progresses and becomes basically, I stayed away from toxic masculinity because I wanted him to be okay with having emotions and working through them, working through trauma, and being okay with having emotions and your own purpose in life. That you don't have to work a 9 to 5 job to be, happy with life. And then Jacques discovers that he's pansexual. And the reason why I chose that sexuality for him is because one of the important themes throughout the story is love is love. So I had him marry a transgendered woman of color, so that there is this unique relationship that focuses on who they are as people, not their sexuality. And the sexuality is only there to teach people that it's just part of who they are. It's not a label. It's not something I'm shining a light on. It's just part of their person, not personality. They're part of their human spirit.
Well, I use sexuality as part of the class strata, where you have the more your prowess, because if you look at the stratas of society, the more powerful you are, the more people you attract to you. So um, the emperor marries a bisexual woman.
Hmm.
Um, he has, but he's not a Western elf. He's a Eastern elf, and he has Western elf admirers. He has bi bisexual followers.
Hmm.
He himself is actually spoiler alert, a demon. He's demonically possessed. That gives him, that's why he has such charisma and supernatural powers, and always knows the right line. He could pick from the crowd who's most willing and able. I mean, he's they all have inner monologue.
Yeah.
They all have, and I thought to myself, I'm heterosexual. I read LGBT material, and I thought to myself, you know what? This is easier to write than I thought, because it's just replace A with B, and
Yeah.
the emotions are still the same.
Exactly. That's why I did it, because it's almost like male writers, especially the straight ones, are afraid to go that, because like, well, I'm not part of that community and I don't understand it. It's like,
Yeah, well, I
not
was
really
worried about the backlash from the community saying, "Oh, you
yeah,
don't know
yeah,
what you're
yeah, yeah,
writing
yeah.
about." But well, I'm not an elf. Spoiler alert: I'm not an elf.
Yeah, I mean that's basically how I was thinking. I'm like, you know what? I may not be any of those, and I'm not trying to um
But I'm not trying to erase them by saying that an
yeah,
entire empire that covers
exactly.
125 star systems with billions of people on each, that everybody's going to be heterosexual. And if you look at the stratas of society and traditional stratas of
Yeah.
society, the higher you go up, the more decadent, to, uh, particularly in Eastern
Mm,
philosophy.
yeah.
And if you look at Eastern legends, there's the gay samurai, and it's literally called the gay samurai, and he's one of their greatest heroes. And
Oh. Mm,
and and, and you just go, there's apart from being gay, there's nothing after that. It's just
yeah.
he's a normal guy, and
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think if the community treated themselves like a normal person and stopped trying this woke garbage, that they'll actually turn around and say, "Oh wow, if people treat us like if we treated everybody as normal, everybody's going to treat us as normal because
Yeah.
of the synchronicity of do unto others,
Hmm. Yeah,
karma,
yeah, my
karma, or however you want to address it."
my best friend who is gay, he thought it was really refreshing that I incorporated LGBTQ characters, not because it's never been done before, but because never thought that I would do something like that. And the reason why it was sparked in me is because it's not really something that exists in old books, like predominantly speaking, because the storyline for at least half of it is set in the 90s. And although gay culture was active at that time, in terms of storytelling, I haven't really seen it that actively, and be seen as normal. And it's not that I'm trying to normalize sexuality. It's more like I'm trying to normalize any kind of person, so that you see them as people first, and whatever else there is to them is secondary.
To quote Martin Luther King, judge them not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And you should, I mean, he was rather narrow in that broad definition, but it still applies.
Yeah,
Judge them
it
not
still
by the
makes sense.
labels, but
Yeah.
by their character. And you'll see that 99% of people fall into the same category. They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, and that's really all I'm trying to do. I mean, in book 4,
Yeah.
um, there's there's actually a rule that the town has, which is that everyone has to be honest on paper. So, for example, Jacques' wife, Exantia, is transgendered, but when she was, first off, she's a detective for a small agency, and on paper, when she was first hired, she was labeled as transgendered. But because over time she identified as a woman, she said, "I'm not working for you until you see me as a woman." Not because of her conforming to the gender normative that's seen for women, but because just physically and personally, that's how she saw herself. So when she quit the force or the agency, and then they were desperate for her, they allowed another layer of flexibility for people. And then she brought on Jacques, when they met in a coffee shop, which was called I think Honey Grapefruit Cafe. I was going on a bit of a comical route for the town because citrus.
Citrus, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just having fun with not having fun. I was really exploring that kind of pairing in people.
Well, in my recent chapter, I use the acceptance of that you had an outsider who's very famous, rich, powerful, and pretty much because they're so smart, they finished all the workbooks, so they didn't have to go to school. But there's elements of her school life that she has to still complete, and one of her classmates is introduced to this new piece of technology, and she can't synchronize with this computer. This computer's only interface is between the mind. It's a thought-controlled device. So she comes along to help her synchronize with it, and she learns that people have a poor view of her because she has never returned their messages or anything like that, because that layer of fandom and that layer of security, has isolated her from those who should have been her classmates. And she realizes that she wants to be part of this group and belonging. So she has to accept them for who they are and become one of them, not them become one of her. It's a very different character arc, I think, where the main character or one of the main characters has to change who they are, not the other way around, where everybody has to be like them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, this is my fourth book, which is more of a side story than a main story. I thought I would give a character arc and an introduction for sort of how the emperor built his harem, and because it's in itself is a character arc. It goes from just because it becomes part of his entire, this entire change, where it's just at first it's just satisfying himself, but over time, starting to see people as individuals, building up, and then as various events unfold, more they stop being just call girls, basically. That's if you ever looked at history beyond the wall of the couple of kings and queens. You had emperors, 1600 years of emperors in China alone, and all of them had harems, and all of them had interesting lives. Some of them, their wives became interesting characters on their own, and that was very inspiring to me. That transformation is not something we see, other than a few. But even then, we have Marie Antoinette is so misrepresented in history, and for a start, she's only 16 when she was executed, I think, or something like that. Elizabeth, she was a warmonger. Well, both Elizabeth I and II. She advocated for every war there ever was. We had a second thought. I thought that was rather one-dimensional. So there are real life one-dimensional people. I always thought that was a cliche. I didn't think people could be so one-dimensional.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about anything with coworkers, they look at me funny and like, why do you think like that? That doesn't make sense. I'm like, well, I'm a writer. I have I
have to be a broad mind. To be a writer, you have to have a broad mind. You can't be woke. You can't be well, you can be sort of conservative, but you know what I mean. You can't be straitjackets. You can't be woke. You can't be religious. You can't be. You can't
be this, can't be that.
Yeah, you can't be a one-dimensional character and write because then every character is one-dimensional. And it's very hard as it is to be diverse in your characters when your spell checker keeps saying, no, change this. This word's a cliche.
Yeah, that's not proper English.
So many times. Hey, you. That's not proper English. It's hello. Hello there. It's like,
I'm
changing my writing.
I've even done that to my editor. She's like, is this what you meant? I'm like, it's just how the character speaks. I'm not trying to confuse you.
Yeah, some people actually say I'm the leader of this tribe, not, tribal leader, I'm leader of this particular group, not, some people are very flowery with their language and other people are not. And these days, this concise movement, particularly with editors, or the anti-SED movement, or the anti-Oxford Comma movement, I think they're all bowel movements. I think they, they're trying to turn writing into, it's like in Shakespeare time when Elizabeth liked Shakespeare so much, she demanded everybody be Shakespeare, and writing is stressful as it is. It's probably very stressful.
Writing is stressful, but it's also very rewarding.
Yeah, but there isn't a writer who doesn't say, yeah, it's stressful at times. And that's where writer block comes in. Writer's block is stress. How do you cope with stress? How do you get back to that center line?
Well, to me, I see writer's block not as that in itself. I see it as I need to take a change of scenery. So instead of seeing writer's block as a myth or as literally something in my way, and internally speaking, I just see it as, you know what, maybe I've been sitting for too long or I've been too distracted. I just need to go for a walk and just, recalibrate myself. So, for example, yesterday I wrote 1,000 words and then I was like, I don't want to write it anymore. So I got up, took my dog outside, went for a walk for a couple blocks, and I was back in it. And not for much longer, but another hour of writing. I usually write 2 to 3 hours a day, for twice a week. I mean, writer's block to me, it's not that it doesn't exist. It's more you have to see it not as an issue, but as an opportunity to step back and ask yourself, what am I missing here? Not what am I doing wrong? Because there is nothing wrong that you're doing when you have a writer's block. It just means you know what you're trying to do, but you're afraid of the execution of what you're about to do. So when you have that hesitation, it's good to step back instead of delving deeper into your paranoia and just take a breath and then go back in.
Okay, I bring up writer's block often, and actually, if those who follow me on Facebook, that's one of my favorite. Wednesday's my meme day, and I post a lot of meme. I usually post at least one meme for writing, and that's usually Wednesday. I post a lot of memes anyway, but writer's block was the feature of this week's meme, and I got some pretty good answers, like the solution: walk around the block. Another one, there's a coffee on the other side, so jump over it. So there's been a lot of, I think there's a general, awakening through the years that I've shared these memes that people are actually starting to see writer's block as something to laugh at, and I think that's a good progression that I've helped people progress, and hopefully inspired enough writers and try and get some of them on to. Some of them on been off to a slow start, but that's all right. I mean, everybody has that slow start, and some people back out at the last minute because, and I understand. Writing is very personal, and everybody's writing experience should be different. I mean, it'd be rather boring if we, I forget, was it The Invention of Lies, where everybody picks up a
I remember that.
Picks up a book and it's, it's this month, it's this month, it's this month, it's this month. And that's all it is the events of that month in such a dry, bland way. Where's the inventing ninjas and such other things jumping out of nowhere, and Lord High Executioners and all that other stuff is just totally. Yep, I'm on board with that. I know it's a great lie, but heck, it's so much better than this stuff we've got. This dry, crisp bread.
There is something I did try that was new to overcome my writer's block. Because sometimes writer's block happens before you start writing. So yesterday, I was extremely tired from just working full time and doing all these interviews and just I wasn't feeling too good. But anyway, I created a document called writing warm up. So what that is I just turn my brain off and I just start typing. There's no rhyme or reason to what I'm writing. There's no story. It's just a page that I'm just filling with text. And it was actually rather funny what I ended up coming up with. It was basically a coffee shop scene of a grizzled cop and a rookie. And the grizzled cop is a slob. So he's talking about a murder case at the beginning. And it's just one line that he says. So he says, "I don't know what to tell you, Chunkster. She's dead. Like ice cubes and a soup." And so, yeah, it just fades away. So it was just a funny, spark to the conversation. And I start describing him. So I say he has mutton chops, he has a bit of scruff, and he's a bit of a porky man, and he's drinking black coffee and a donut. Very typical cop thing. I wasn't. That's why I was turning my brain off. It's just a blah. There we go. And the the rookie's like, "Don't call me that. Don't call me Chunkster." And it's just a back and forth between them of them bantering, and then the cop the grizzled cop at the end acts very grotesque towards a diner type of American, a very colorful waitress. He says, "Better keep your wits about you with that fine ass of yours," and then smacks her on an ass. And that's how the scene pretty much ends. I give them very basic names, like the rookie's called Clay Benson, and the cop is called Fred something. Fred Harlack. So it was the typical American scene, but it was really funny and light, and that's what got me in the mood to write. Even though the next thing that I was going to write was extremely dark and lavish and very kind of final for the characters mid arc. So it helped me just get out of my own head. That's really what you're doing when you're getting over a writer's block, is getting out of your own head and just writing. Because the problem with new writers when they encounter writer's block is that they see it as, oh, well, I guess I can't write. It's like, no. You're thinking so much. That's what writer's block is. You're thinking so much about the execution of what you're about to write. You just do it. It's the first draft. You don't have to think so hard. If you think too hard, you come up with nothing, because you end up literally getting in your own way. You can really turn garbage into something great once you just explore different ways of doing revision every time that you revise a story.
That's well, a good way of looking at writer's block. That is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Everybody should realize that we get all these opportunities every day to basically stop what you're doing and take stock take what you're doing. And if you've got writer's block, is that because you're wandering off the path of the story you're writing? Take a moment to say, I thought I smelt smoke. Intensifies. Yeah, that's true. Writer's block, the house is on fire or something like that, Is there something wrong?
That's a good
Oh,
one.
dear.
Is the cat
Anyway,
okay?
there's final question,
Yeah.
and it's been good, and we'll just read what Graz has to say. Are you using sexual orientation as some sort of superpower within your writing universe? Is your character pansexual that would have meaning? Sorry,
Are you
my
using
eyes.
sexual attraction as some sort of superpower within your writing universe? Is your character pansexual? That would mean having a sexual attraction to any genre, gender, would give them an advantage when it comes to pulling information from someone who identifies as hetero? I guess so. I mean, I view my characters always as human first. So when it comes to any kind of character trait, then you seeing it as a powerful tool for their advantage. Uh, I see it as them uh, showing how certain they are of themselves, and therefore showing weakness in someone who isn't sure of themselves. Therefore, giving them the advantage to just ask questions boldly without any hesitation. So, for example, in book 4, Exantia corrects Boone's behavior towards a transgender male because of his, I don't know, it's not that Boone is, a bigot or anything. He was 30, but he wasn't really taught how to talk to people that are from the LGBTQ community. So her superpower, I guess, was to just be definitive about the human aspect of seeing others as just people. So, to answer your question of how can someone who is pansexual pull information from someone who's hetero, well, that's what Exantia is going to be doing in book 5 towards the mayor the mayor's wife in Citrus. So, a little bit of a spoiler. Actually, there actually is no certainty, so I can actually say this. There is a rumor that Maya Mira, the wife of the mayor of Citrus, was part of a female serial killer club. But there is rumor that she is going solo in hiding. So, because Exantia is weary of this, she uses her power as someone who is transgendered to call them out on this. So, I hope I answered your question because I'm a very grounded writer. So I always have grounded characters. So to see their personality traits as superpowers, it's not that I don't want to, it's more that I just see it as part of who they are and their strength.
Yeah, I think superpower. I haven't seen anything really outside of politics where that people have used their attraction or belief systems as a superpower. Other than Jedi. Jedi's pretty much where they use their beliefs as a superpower. I'm infallible because I'm a Jedi. And that's that. I think when you use
Yeah.
something as a superpower, if you want to go back to the Star Wars analogy, which
Yeah.
is actually taken historically from the fall
Mm.
of great religions when they were at the height of their power, they believed they were infallible, and that fallen order is,
Mm.
the fallen order. Most people don't realize it's the Templar Knights.
Mm.
That's where it
Well,
comes from, the fall of the Templar Knights.
the thing I can say about Jacques, the pansexual character, that when it comes to being in a magical environment, he does get the opportunity to use magic to defend himself. So I guess in a certain way, when he does have the gift of temporary magic, he does use it to his advantage, not just to defend himself for survival, but also to protect others that he loves, and also himself. So, for example, in book 2, part of his leg becomes something that I created from Theranosita, the sister planet of Earth, something called Daka. It's this type of rock substance that is impenetrable. So when he's on this mountain called Mount Kadal, his leg accidentally gets trenched in this extremely hot lava jelly-esque type of material that disintegrated his muscles. But because the Light King, King Estev, wanted them to win, he gave him basically a leg made of Daka rock and sand. So that was his power for that book, his super speed and strength with that one leg, so that he could keep going through the journey. So I wouldn't weaponize or make it a power for his sexuality, because the thing about sexuality is if you weaponize it, then it takes away who they are as a person, because it can't be the forefront of what a person is. It's just who they're attracted to. To see it as a weapon is ridiculous, because it means that you're focusing on their sexuality and not their capabilities as a person, because our thoughts and actions is our power, not our sexuality. So to see it that way is, I don't want to say it's wrong, but it shouldn't be the most important part of the character.
Okay, thanks for coming. Any final thoughts?
For final thought, I guess I'll just quickly mention 3 projects that I'm working on. So, Sahon, which is the final book, fifth and final book of Boone and Jacque. Then, because I've done my research and talked to people, I am going to also be doing a serial killer origin story, which I am really looking forward to doing, because I've not only done my research and watched a bunch of true crime documentaries and biopics, but there's something very interesting about the mind of a killer that I want to explore in a new land called Halliburton City, which is an amalgamation of Cairo, Egypt, New York, and England. And it has these different notes of environment, very Gotham kind of. Anyway, once that's done, I'm gonna do a brother sister adventure story, and then Theranos, which is going to be a 3-in-1 book that has 3 stories. So, The Fall of King Talbot, which is the brothers King Reeve and Estev's father, and then a Animal War book, and then a third one called The Traveler, which is essentially going to tell you how Settleton came to be, because that didn't always exist. Before, it was some small forgotten town from Canada and Saskatchewan, and then it became that. Because essentially, Theranos is going to explain why the world is the way it is in Boone and Jacque, because it wasn't always that way. So you can reach me at AG Flitcher as my handle at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Right, and links for all your books, well, the first 4 anyway, in the description below.
Yep.
And for YouTube and legal purposes, I did not pay you and you did not pay me for this interview. Any contributions to the channel are voluntarily. Links are in the description below. I hope that you and everybody else who watches this video will subscribe, share this video out there, because it is the only way most of us ever get to advertise our material. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
And we shall see you all later.
It was great fun. Bye-bye.
Bye.